Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and welcome to Longsword. Now all of that's pretty cool, but we're not going to do any of that. This is what real Wild Longsword gameplay looks like. Well, there's a lot to cover this weapon, but clearly there's a new dawn and new day for the meta gameplay loop of Longsword in Wilds. But you know, you can play a weapon how you want to. But I want to give you the options, the tools, and the reasons behind it all. It's going to be a lot to cover, so while it will start basic, things are going to get more and more advanced for every topic we cover. Please be sure then to use the timestamps to go back, skip forward, come back to when you need to, anything you want to focus in on. So let's begin. So as always, we begin in the training yard where we're going to show all of the information for the weapon. At the starting point of these though, I like to open up the play guide just to remind you guys that you can do this. To get extra information about all the weapons, whether it's the basics of all the controls, suggested combos, which aren't always the best, and the weapon properties, which as you can see, it's a simple overview for the one main system this weapon has, the spirit gauge. By landing attacks on monsters, we fill the spirit gauge, which we can then spend on spirit blade attacks, eventually ending in the spirit round slash, which will level up the gauge by 1. As it says, there are other ways to do so as well. Now, when we eventually reach the third level, which is red, that's the maximum level, which enhances different attacks and allows up new powerful follow-up attacks. It even tells us that there is a couple ways to extend red gauge, and let's talk about that. So, as it says, we have nothing in the gauge, or a little bit in this case, and as we deal some basic attacks, we build some spirit gauge, which we're then able to spend on the spirit blade combo by pressing R2, as you can see. This ends in the spirit round slash, which gives us that one level. Now we're in white, which is the first level. You can see that the level of spirit that we're at is slowly decaying as time goes on. And as I'm not actually attacking anymore, roughly every 5 seconds, I'm losing spirit gauge as well. So you need to keep attacking. Anyway, we level up again and now we're in yellow. With pretty much the same rules, but we're slowly enhancing our output by raising these levels. Let's finally put myself into red gauge to show you how that one's a little bit different. As you can see, the spirit level, the gauge, is going to steadily drain so that we drop down into yellow when that hits 0. But as a cool detail while we're in red, when you're doing your spirit blade combo, it no longer actually costs anything to use, it's just naturally going down anyway. But as you just saw there, we're able to extend how long we stay in red by performing the spirit round slash attack, and that gives us a little bit more time. The other way that you can extend how long red gauge actually lasts is by performing the Foresight whirl slash. That slightly increases the amount of time that you're in red, but you know, importantly, it also allows you to immediately follow up with the round slash, which will also increase the time that you're in red. It's not infinite, you can't stay in it forever, you're gonna drop out of it, but there are those ways to extend the duration. So let's start with the basic combos that we have, which are going to be like this when you're not in red gauge, because you're going to find your basic combos change when you hit red level gauge. So if we do the triangle combo, we're going to start with overhead slash twice and then crescent slash back into overhead slash back into crescent slash, and you can just keep doing this. Not exactly the fastest combo, but it's reasonable. Meanwhile, we have the circle combo, which is a thrust into rising slash, into thrust into rising slash, infinite. But we can start to overlap them. Overhead into rising slash is an option, triangle into circle there. But you'll find the circle combo, which is thrust into rising slash, is more reliable as an infinite combo to stay active and stay attacking. This is important because you can't do your Foresight slash if you haven't done an attack already. You can't go into your special sheath if you haven't done an attack already. So staying active, having just done an attack, is an important part of playing Longsword. The other part of your basic combos then is the fade slash, which allows you to go backwards like so by pressing triangle and circle together. But you can also do a lateral fade slash, moving you sideways, but also, as you can see, building up a lot of spirit gauge pretty effectively. Now there are a couple ways to effectively build gauge. One of them would be to do the overhead slash into rising slash into the fade slash, and as you can see, that from 0 builds us straight all the way to full gauge so that we can start doing the spirit blade combo. Pretty nice. But you know, to do the full spirit blade combo, you don't actually need to be full gauge, you need a good chunk of it. So you know, just pressing triangle for the overhead, then going straight into the fade slash is usually enough to get yourself to the spirit blade combo and get yourself through to spirit round slash. So that's building combos and the basics of your combos. Let's now talk about that spirit combo, which can immediately be used as an undraw unsheath attack by pressing R2 and doing the first part of the combo. To remind you, pressing this once is part 1, then we have part 2, part 3, and then the final part is the round slash, which is what's leveling you up. But there are ways to skip to that round slash much quicker. For example, as we've shown, the fade slash is a very effective way to deal damage and build up a lot of gauge. And this combos straight into its own unique attack with the spirit attacks. This is the spirit step slash, which as you can see is a gap closer. And off the back of a step slash, you immediately go into part 3. So the step slash allows you to skip part 1 and part 2 and end up at 3, which will be followed by the round slash. Pretty important to know. We can also move while using the Spirit Blade combo now, an effective way to move forward or backwards or sideways as well. And by using focus mode at the same time, you can stay on your target while moving maybe to a better hit zone ever so slightly. So you have a lot more freedom of movement, that's for sure, with the new Spirit Blade movement, alongside the classic lateral fade slashes that are going to build that gauge. But now let's start talking about the ways we level up the gauge effectively. As we've seen, at the end of the Spirit Blade combo, you're going to be doing the round slash, which is going to be a way to level up immediately to the next spirit level. A new move that you can do though is the Spirit Charge, which basically after the first part of Spirit Blade, you can hold R2 and do the Spirit Charge to unleash the Spirit Round Slash. Amazing. However, as you'll see when we hold this R2 button, we see the Spirit Charge. At the top right, we have different moves we can pull out. So there was Spirit Blade 2 by sending it out basically immediately. Hold it a bit longer, we go to Spirit Blade 3, so we're nearly at the end of the combo for the Round Slash. But it's not until we hold it until it's fully charged up that we can do that instant round slash to level up. So there's still value in letting it loose a little bit early and getting to a round slash earlier anyway. And as you can see, by holding it, it's also going to build that spirit gauge while you're in this stance and basically charging up like a Saiyan or something. And in regards to ending it early, you might find yourself in a bad spot, so you need to end it early to go into a counter setup with maybe special sheath, or the same thing, we might end it early and go straight into the Foresight slash counter. There's also potential movement you might do by holding the charge, because as you can see, even while using focus mode, I can turn around and I can slowly move around to reposition and maybe just eke into the correct distance so it actually lands. But there are more ways to level up than just that, like for example the Foresight slash, which allows us to ignore the attack and then follow it instantly with the Spirit Round Slash. So that's another way to quickly get to that round slash. Or you could enter your special sheath mode and then unleash the EI Spirit Slash at the right moment, successfully leveling us up and dealing a nice hit. I'll explain these parries in just a moment, because there is just one more way that we can level up that I want to mention, and that is by using your focus mode strike on a wound. As you can see, it does a special animation and levels us up once for popping one wound, though there's a lot of interesting properties about that we'll talk about in a sec. But now let's explain the parries, because this is a really important part of the weapons kit. The two main parries that you'll be doing the most of is the Foresight slash, and then also entering the special sheath and unleashing with R2 the Spirit Slash. Let's start with the Foresight slash. This must be used after an attack. So to do it, I just press R2 and circle together, but it doesn't work. The reason for that is because you need to have just used an attack. It must be comboed into. So as I go for overhead slash and then try it, suddenly it works. That's why fishing is so important. The quick combo or thrust into rising slash leaves us in a permanent active state to throw it out whenever we want to. Now, something you need to be wary of with this attack though is my spirit gauge. So let's build some of that up real quick. You see that I've got like 80% here. As I go for it and don't successfully land it, I'm now suddenly empty. My gauge is completely empty. Pretty punishing. However, if I actually land it, you'll see that I'm going to get a bunch of gauge. In fact, it's going to completely fill it. But the key here is that following upward swing that has to land to actually get that gauge to fill up, and that's what allows you to do that round slash follow-up for the level up. So you need to successfully land the counter timing, then you also need to land the follow-up hit to be able to combo into that round slash. Overall, it is a very forgiving parry because the frames at which it triggers are very kind, but it's one that moves you physically. That means it could be used to evade an attack. If you mistime it, it physically moves you out the way. But another useful detail about it is, let's say you mess up the timing, you can instantly combo it into a special sheath and try the next counter. Kind of like a panic button option. Remember though, you don't have to trigger that follow-up attack. I don't have to press R2. I could go for anything else in that scenario. Like, for example, instead of going for that follow-up, I could go for a different attack, and then go for another one. Like, for example, instead of going for that counter, I could go for a special sheath and then maybe set up for a different counter. Maybe in that scenario, I'd go for that special sheath because I can't get the round slash off, so I go for the counter instead. Next, let's talk about the special sheath though, which has a couple of really cool options. Again, like the Foresight slash, you must do something before you can activate it, any kind of attack, then we combo into it. Top right, you can see two options, but if I choose to not do anything, after about 3 seconds, it cancels out of the special sheath. So you need to do it thinking something's going to happen within that time. If it goes wrong and you can't land the counter, then there's nothing wrong with going for an EI slash, which does have special properties, as you can see. It's filling the spirit gauge passively for the next 15 seconds. This doesn't work in red gauge where it's going to always drain unless you do like a round slash or whatever, but otherwise it is actually a very useful thing to have going passively. Plus, what's pretty cool about this is that you can get out of animation locks. Like if you find yourself stuck in an animation, you go straight into the special sheath and combo that into an EI slash. But let's talk about that other counter, where we set up in this special stance and then unleash the spirit slash at the last moment, successfully leveling us up and dealing great damage. Obviously, it can't level us up when we're in red gauge like now, and it also won't refill that red gauge in any way. But between the two of them, it does do more damage than the Foresight slash. And it's also going to trigger instantly rather than require a follow-up. However, there's a special skill called Quick Sheath that does exist. It increases the sheathing speed of your weapon. So compared to having 0 quick sheath, this is so much faster, putting us in that state to counter or whatever so much quicker as a follow-up. A real quality of life skill for longsword players that we kind of gotta run. Another cool detail about this counter is the fact that it can combo straight into Spirit Blade 3, which will allow that round slash follow-up if for some reason you missed it, or maybe there's time after you landed the counter to then go into the Spirit Round Slash for another level up in that moment. So lots of perks to the counter systems there. But now it's time to talk about red gauge and the special ways that it changes your basic combos. For example, your basic triangle combo has completely changed and is now the Crimson Slash combo, which comes in 3 parts. And as you can see, it deals great damage. Let's take a careful look at this combo. The first attack is actually multiple. As you can see, I'm attacking twice in 1 button press for really, really good damage actually. As we go into part 2, it's another multi-hit, but the damage numbers are significantly smaller than part 1. Then we go into part 3, and it's a triple hit by comparison, and the DPS there is phenomenal as well. The downside of that is we have to get through part 1 and 2 to get to that really juicy DPS. Now, pretty interestingly, you can indeed interrupt this combo with the Spirit Blade combo if you want to. Since that first part of the combo is so effective and high damage, double hit, then you press Spirit Blade 1 and get a really nice hit. Optimal DPS with this weapon is actually to do that. Crimson Slash 1, Spirit Blade 1, Crimson Slash 1, Spirit Blade 1, over and over and over. And obviously it can be done the other way around, interrupting Spirit Blade with Crimson Slash. But there's more to the red gauge than just Crimson Slash. For example, let's go into that Spirit Round Slash and look at the new follow-up that exists after the Round Slash, the Spinning Crimson Slash, which, by the way, if I do that from pretty far away, we can see that it actually has some serious distance on it. I leapt all the way over to it and actually hit it. It's also really respectable damage as a follow-up, so if you are in red gauge and just landed a Round Slash, it's absolutely worth it to go for the Spinning Crimson Slash because it hits very hard. And here's a pretty cool detail to do with that follow-up. Let's say I'm in yellow right now and I'm going to do a round slash to enter red, right? Well, the moment I'm in red and I've just done a round slash, I can instantly follow up with the Spinning Crimson Slash, so I absolutely should. But more changes in red gauge, even more. For example, the Foresight slash now becomes a new Foresight Whirl slash, which as you can see has significantly bigger range to it. But it does cost me that gauge to use, so I don't want to use it blindly. But as I showed earlier, it is a technical way that you can extend how long you're in red gauge by successfully landing it and also hitting the Spirit Round Slash after that. But now it's time to talk about the big one. By pressing R2 and triangle together, I can do a special thrust, which if it lands in a target, brings me up into the air and has me slam down with the Helm Breaker. That, as you can see, deals a load of ticks of damage and is awesome, but it costs 1 level of the spirit gauge to use. And you'll need to have at least 1 level to spend to use it. What's pretty nice about this detail though, is it has hyper armor during the thrust, so as you can see, I'm not interrupted by that at all. You can even do that during roars and other knockbacks, which is a pretty handy feature. You can also now cancel this by pressing square or R1 while you're in the air to sheath the weapon, cancelling the effect and preventing you missing it if you used it the wrong time. And another pretty cool detail about it is it combos off of most anything. You can just go straight into that spirit thrust and send it out. But of course, there's something new in Wilds for that Helm Breaker, and we got to talk about it. It's the new follow-up, which allows you to, after landing that Helm Breaker, combo into the Spirit Release Slash, which basically smashes the target and the location that you hit with the Helm Breaker, dealing even more damage than the Helm Breaker itself. This attack has hyper armor during its use, preventing knockback, reducing damage while you're doing it. And with the fact that it deals even more damage than the Helm Breaker, you absolutely will want to follow it up, despite the fact that yes, it does cost 1 extra spirit level to follow up with. So as I use Helm Breaker in red gauge, I drop down to yellow, then I follow up with the Spirit Release and drop down into white. So by doing this strong combo, you are having to build back up again and dropping out of red, that's for sure. Which is really unfortunate because red is so effective in Wilds. But now it's time to talk about focus mode and specifics for Longsword as well. Starting with the special focus strike that Longsword has, which is called the Unbound Thrust, a special animation that thrusts forward and it breaks the wound. As you can see, even though I wasn't targeting it, I actually hit multiple wounds there, and instead of getting 1 level up, I got 2. So making sure that you save wounds for this specific attack to quick level up after you go back down out of red is incredibly impactful. But you can do more with it than just stand there. You can also press it and move sideways or even backwards. This allows you to kind of accurately position and try to break multiple wounds at once with this Unbound Thrust. Now, interestingly, it does combo into other attack strings. So after you do Unbound Thrust, we can immediately go into the Spirit Blade combo, part 3, straight into a round slash, which is awesome. Lots of level up potential there. But as always with focus mode, I need to mention that you have better movement towards your target if you're using it. When you're trying to move towards a target without focus mode, you go a certain distance. If you're aiming at a target in focus mode and try to move towards that target, you move further, you get closer. So by aiming at a target, you will be magnetized to it and it draws you towards that target at greater distances. Not only that, it helps you stay focused so that you're able to accurately attack the target while moving around it and make sure we're hitting these round slashes. Useful as well for the actual Helm Breaker so we can aim accurately and hit the part of the monster that we want to. And of course, it is part of how we're going to aim and hit these wounds and get multiple levels in one use. So focus mode has a lot of use, you want to be using it, and as usual, I recommend the toggle. Okay, next section is going to be aerial attacks, like say just a classic jumping slash when you're in the air, pressing triangle. Next is the leaping Spirit Blade, so it puts us into this special Spirit Blade attack, so part 2 there, part 3 immediately, then the round slash, allowing us to kind of bypass the combo somewhat. We can of course do this type of stuff by jumping off the back of the seikret and pressing the same inputs. Now for some reason Longsword has a pretty unique dismount attack. As a dismount attack it's not bad, great range to it, multiple hits as well, but for whatever reason they also made it a parry. As you can see, it will level you up if you successfully land that dismount attack, so maybe for Aurora or certain attacks it's possible. It's a bit niche use, but knowing you can do that is worth mentioning. I should also mention, of course, there are sliding, so if you're running down a slope and sliding, you can press triangle to go up in the air and then go down in a jumping slash. If you want to stay in the air as much as possible, we could do that jumping rising slash and then RT to go into the Spirit Blade, which has that helicopter effect, allowing you to stay in the air even longer against aerial monsters. 2 other cool attacks that you have, the sneak attack, which has really good damage and will cause a flinch like any sneak attack does. Sadly, it's not going to give you like a level up or anything, but it is still worth using for its output. The Longsword also has a really unique and incredible looking mounting finisher attack where you sheath the blade to reveal where you cut the monster while you are finishing the mount. Super cool, ridiculous, I love it. But now we've covered the full moveset of the weapon, it's time to talk about your best DPS and combos for different purposes. Let's start with your best DPS combo, which I mentioned earlier. When you're in red gauge, the thing that you're going to want to be doing is the Crimson Slash Part 1 and the Spirit Blade Part 1 combo. So that's triangle, R2, triangle, R2, triangle, R2, infinitely. And obviously you can do it the other way around, R2 for the Spirit Blade 1 and then Crimson Slash 1 and then you just repeat. Whichever way you do it, same thing. It's ridiculous output and it's what you're seeing speedrunners use to ridiculous effect. This may sadden you because it does mean that you don't want to waste red gauge because you've got the Crimson Slash combo there on doing Helm Breakers. If you don't care about speed running, you know, make use of this combo whenever you can, but there's nothing wrong with using Helm Breaker and the release follow-up. It's still great damage, it feels great, it looks great, and there's argument to be said that, hey, I'm not going to get the option to do that combo with a Crimson Slash and Spirit Blade spam, so I'll go for a Helm Breaker because there's an opening. There's just one thing you need to know, and it's about Corrupted Mantle. This gives you extra damage or extra attacks on certain movesets, so I'm able to get 2 hits on 1 hit on many attacks across the board for all the weapons. For a longsword, obviously that's going to be absolutely nuts when it comes to the Crimson Slash combo, so you're able to get so much more DPS out because you're using this combo in relation as well to using the Corrupted Mantle. So while you've got Corrupted Mantle on, you need to be using the Crimson Slash Spirit Blade combo. It's just so much DPS. With that in mind, you're going to want to build your spirit levels as fast as possible in general. Now, technically, the fastest way you're going to be doing that is landing counters or maybe doing spirit charge by skipping the spirit combo. There is something to be said though about the fact that the spirit blade combo in its full use is going to get you so much more damage than if you just did the spirit charge. But if you're trying to reach optimal DPS for like a knockdown or a trap moment, you want to be in red gauge, get there as quick as you can. So that may mean actually using the spirit charge in many cases, but for most cases, it's probably going to be the case that you're going for counters instead, because that's such an effective way to level up and deal great damage and ignore what the monster's doing. Now, as I said near the start of the video, there is an effective way to build up spirit gauge to spend on the spirit combo as quick as possible. The fastest way to fill the gauge is triangle, then circle and triangle, which is basically overhead slash, rising slash, fade slash. As you can see, full bar. But I also did say that you don't need a full bar to do the full combo, you just need a good chunk of it, which can be achieved by just pressing triangle and then triangle and circle, so overhead slash into fade slash. That's more than enough to do the spirit combo. We don't need to do more than that. Next question, which counter should you do? Should you be doing the Foresight and then going straight into the Spirit Round Slash? Or should you be doing the Special Sheath? Which is, you know, technically a harder counter to actually land because the timing's tighter, but it does more damage. And it applies the damage instantly, whereas with the Foresight Slash, you might miss and cost yourself some of your spirit gauge, and you might miss the follow-up upswing to get that actual hit and follow into the round slash, which you also might miss. So on average, especially with quick sheath, I think going for the spirit slash counter is going to be the general rule to go for, especially with the fact that you're doing all kinds of things and then quickly comboing into the special sheath to go for that counter anyway. However, I don't want to forget that when we're in red gauge, it is going to be a way to build back up red gauge and stay in it longer, so it's worth using especially the Whirl slash versions of Foresight Slash. And the last thing I want to keep in mind is remember, if something's happening, remember you can always combo into the special sheath if you mess up a counter and want to set up another one. Or maybe you're just doing different combos and want to combo nicely into that EI slash to help build some gauge and keep damage going. Basically, special sheath is a great way to get yourself out of animation lock, keep damage going, and set up for a counter even in the tightest moments, like so. Let's talk about your optimal opening. There's two kind of versions I'm going to mention here. The straightforward one is to open with a sneak attack, which is awesome because it causes a flinch on the monster. This gives you enough time to charge up a spirit charge to get yourself an immediate level up. From there, we can enter special sheath to go ahead and EI spirit slash counter the roar for another level up and great damage. And don't forget, that counter can be comboed into Spirit Blade 3 as we've discussed, which will then immediately follow up into the round slash for another level up. By doing this combo properly, you will be in red gauge at the opening of the fight, which is awesome. However, technically there's another way to open the fight, which is technically more output, just way harder. By placing these items barrel bombs down, they do a little explosion, which is technically something you can counter. So you could put one of these down with 3 levels of quick sheath to enter your special sheath super quick, in time to counter the explosion and give yourself a free level up in the middle of combat. It's a pretty niche thing, but longsword players have been doing this for a little while, and if you really want to maximize, it's worth mentioning. The overall gameplay loop of this current version of Longsword is quite simple on paper though. You want to reach red gauge as soon as possible through your variety of options. You then maximize your time in the red gauge period by landing the insane Crimson Slash 1, Spirit Blade 1, infinite repeat combo as much as you can. If given the niche situation that a Helm Breaker into Spirit Release near, say, red gauge end becomes worth using, then yeah, go for it if you're given the opening. It's just unfortunate that you'll drop not only out of red, but out of yellow into white by doing that. So it's important to remember to save wounds for fast, focused strike re-entry into red gauge to maximize the proper DPS combo again. And don't forget, even if you just hit one wound, you can combo off the focus strike, straight into Spirit Blade 3, which will go into the round slash for another level up. And keep in mind that Corrupted Mantle is busted for a longsword thanks to the Crimson Slash combo, so you absolutely want to be making use of that whenever Corrupted Mantle is available. Otherwise, you're essentially unrelentingly attacking the monster with the maximum DPS option you have in that moment, only stopping to interrupt what you're doing with a counter. Whether that's setting up a special sheath counter or going for a Foresight slash, it depends on the context of the moment. For this next section, I'd like to highlight a couple really good skills for a longsword. Firstly, Quick Sheath, which is going to greatly increase the sheathing speed that we're using with Special Sheath. I think this is a necessary thing since we're using it so much in our normal gameplay. You can achieve this through 3 level 1 decoration slots, so it's not hard to do. Next is Adrenaline Rush, and also the potential of Counter Strike as well, increasing attack power after executing a perfectly timed evade just as the monster attacks. So as you might have imagined, this will count for any of your counters, so as you can see, Adrenaline Rush has activated. So since it's going to naturally happen in our normal gameplay, it's a very good skill to run. Another one I want to highlight is Counter Strike. Temporarily increases attack power after being knocked down, so you know, that will just happen in a fight if you get hit. But as I said, there are instances of hyper armor with the longsword. So one instance of hyper armor we have is during the thrust part of the Helm Breaker, but it does not actually activate Counter Strike, unfortunately. But the follow-up full release will trigger Counter Strike. It's a bit niche and a bit unreliable, but it does work with this weapon, so it is something worth mentioning. Another skill worth talking about for longsword is Maximum Might, which increases your affinity by up to 30% while it's active. All you need is full stamina, which is surprisingly easy to keep going on longsword because, as you can see, a lot of my attacks, they're just not using stamina at all. In fact, even something like going for a Helm Breaker or whatever, this leap into the air and these big attacks, it costs nothing. If I'm doing a Spirit Charge, that will cost stamina, to be fair, but after 2 seconds of being back to full stamina, I'm already going to get Max Might back. The most important combo, the DPS combo, Crimson into Spirit, this does not cost any stamina either, so for the duration of your max DPS, you'll be full stamina. Though it is true that you will use some stamina during certain counters, again, it comes back so quick that it's not a problem. But there you have it. That's my overview of all things longsword, all the details and tricks that I've been able to grasp for this Wilds version. If there's anything else that you'd like to add, then let us know in the comments. But I think this weapon's in a very strong state right now, especially with the Corrupted Mantle's silly DPS that has. I do think some people are going to be saddened by the lack of, the meta being around Helm Splitter, repeat spam, especially with the cool new release attack. But at the same time, I think it's really cool what they've done to red gauge to make it worth staying in. These new follow-ups with the round slash, the improved Foresight Whirl, let alone the Crimson combo being really cool. I think that's fun in its own way. It's just, Helm Breaker and full release, it'd be nicer if they were even more worth engaging with. But obviously, longsword is still in a very good state. So I hope this guide was useful. Good luck with your own longsword gameplay. For now, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.